So I'm delighted to be speaking with Antonio and Lucas, and it's actually father and son, and they have a tremendous history in terms of the application of effective means of helping to improve health and performance. And both Antonio and Lucas joined us in Oxygen Advantage a couple of years ago and have been applying our technique, the Oxygen Advantage, to Colombia and in Spanish. So it's a privilege to speak with you today. And I think we're going to have a good conversation in terms of the application of breathing and the potential it has across a number of fields, and that it is reaching out to Colombia, which is tremendous news. So welcome. We will have a good conversation, the two of us.
Yeah, definitely we will. The conversations with you are always very interesting, and the honor is us to be here with you. You really change the way we work, and the method is tremendous for our students or patients, has been a game changer for us. So thank you so much for having us.
So great, my pleasure, both Lucas and Antonio. And sorry there, I could have crossed you, Antonio, there. I'll let you in.
No, don't worry. And I want to say thank you so much, because really, your method changed literally my life. That's because I had a past I had a long disease since I was a child, and it was limiting my life. But now my life is pretty normal, and I think better because your method. And because it helps me to understand my meditation practice a lot. It was the lost piece of the puzzle. So thank you so much. It's amazing your work with breathing. Thank you, Patrick.
In terms of breathing, I suppose the one aspect of it is that we need to look at breathing from a number of different viewpoints without necessarily complicating it. That we can teach breathing from different perspectives, but to keep it very, very simple as well. And I think we have to state that a lot of the information out there about breathing is not correct. Would you agree?
We have had a lot of trainers and yoga teachers and even doctors, and they don't know too much about the real science behind it, behind the breathing. And sometimes trying to improve some issue, they are making it worse. And that happened a lot. So I think this work we're doing with the Oxygen Advantage really clarify things and give new tools to professionals to work better with people. So it's definitely a game changer for everyone.
I remember, Lucas, I remember coming across this. It was in the year 1998, so it's almost 22 years ago. And I was a chronic mouth breather because of having asthma, and my nose was stuffy all the time. And I remember doing the nose unblocking exercise, which is very, very easy for anybody with a congested nose, that you can take a normal breath in and out through your nose, you pinch your nose, you walk around, and you walk holding your breath until you feel a relatively moderate to strong air hunger, and then you let go and you breathe in through your nose and calm your breathing. And I did that a few times, and it was the first time that I could open up my nose. And then I started breathing through it, and at the start, it was a little bit difficult because I was feeling air hunger, but I kept breathing through my nose, and my asthma symptoms in my first week reduced by about 50%. But it wasn't just my asthma that was improving. My mind was feeling calmer, and my sleep quality was feeling better. And I suppose we have to consider this. Breathing is a very basic function, but a vital function. And if our breathing is off, if it's not up to par, it's not just our breathing that is affected. It also affects other functions. And I often say to people coming into me with anxiety and panic disorder and depression, and I look at their breathing patterns, and their breathing is often fast and it's shallow. And, they're often mouth breathing and having irregular breathing. And they've never been instructed how that can be feeding back into their symptoms. And also with sleep, you know, the impact that if we wake up with a dry mouth in the morning, our sleep is likely to be light. We have shallow sleep, we're more likely to snore, to have obstructive sleep apnea during sleep. And then we were waking up feeling exhausted. And how exhaustion is negatively impacting mental health. So in order to bring a calmness to the mind, we need to look at sleep and we need to look at breathing. And that's for everybody. This is not just for people with anxiety. I don't have anxiety, but 20 years ago, my mind was quite active and my concentration would not have been good. And sometimes I feel that, you know, I'm nearly 50 years of age, and when I was going through school, we were required to concentrate, but nobody ever told me how to concentrate. You know, our academic ability is determined by how well we do in exams. But in order to do well in exams, you need to be able to concentrate. But what about the child or the teenager or the adult, whether they are in school or university or in the corporate world, that they have a slightly racing mind, that they are breathing, that they are in more of a slightly stressed state, a sympathetic activation, their sleep is impacted. Those people cannot work, they cannot function to 100% of their potential by breathing that way. 20 years ago, I was not functioning to the best of my ability. But I suppose I learned to cope with that. And it's only when you look back that you really realize where I was then and where I am now. And it comes back to this, Lucas and Antonio. People often think about the breathing as take a few deep breaths or fill your lungs full of air. There's no consideration to the depth of breathing. And very simple, what we are doing, and you can show people how to influence blood circulation, to open up blood vessels in a few minutes, how to increase oxygen delivery from the red blood cells to the tissues and organs, how to bring a calming effect to the central nervous system, how to bring a better balance in terms of the functioning of the autonomic nervous system, the automatic functioning of the body, how to improve sleep, how to improve concentration, how to reduce breathlessness during physical exercise, how to maintain focus. So there's really a lot going on here, but it's not just about taking the big breath. Where do you think the biggest mistake is often made with breathing? And I'm just curious, is it the same in Colombia as it is here in Ireland and Europe?
Yeah, definitely the same. I mean, people always talk about breathing and they talk about this kind of deep breath that is not a deep breath. It's just a big, shallow breath. It's completely different. And I mean, I has had trainers, physical trainers in gyms, saying people, you have to breathe really strong and big, so you have better oxygenation. And they put the people making a really strong workout, having these big breaths, and of course they are gassing out and they are not having enough oxygen uptake in the tissues. So it's a really common mistake.
Yes.
Because it's counterintuitive. I mean, I know we're going to talk about this later, but it's like this paradox about breathing. If you breathe too much, you are not well oxygenated, and people cannot get it. And it's simple, but this has been the biggest issue with training people, because at first it's difficult to understand that, right? Breathing less for better breathing, right? And about you was saying, I mean, for how long you struggle with medication and doctors till you find out the real problem. And how many people is going around there with this kind of issues and they don't know really where is the problem. So this definitely is a huge tool for therapists to work on. You are about to say something, Antonio?
Yes. There is a quote from Gurdjieff that I think is so brilliant about all this. He said, the first reason for the slavery of man is his ignorance, and above all, his ignorance of himself. Without the knowledge of himself, without the understanding of the movement and the functions of his machine, man cannot be free. He cannot govern himself, and he will always remain a slave and a plaything of the forces that act on him.
And that's from Gurdjieff.
Yes, from Gurdjieff.
Yes.
Okay.
I remember reading his book many years ago. I think it's Meetings with Remarkable People, was it? I can't remember. It's gone back a long time.
Yeah.
But I think he's correct. And it's coming back to, so let's just tease that out a little bit. So the more air we breathe, the less oxygen that gets delivered throughout the body. And yes, it is counterintuitive, but yet we also know, Lucas and Antonio, that if I said to the person outside, I would like you to take 10 big breaths, how would their head feel? They will feel
dizzy,
lightheaded or dizzy. And what's happening there is that the 10 big breaths, it's not adding any more oxygen in terms of blood oxygen saturation, because our red blood cells are already almost fully loaded with oxygen with normal breathing. But the 10 big breaths gets rid of too much carbon dioxide from the blood through the lungs. And carbon dioxide is not just this waste gas, but carbon dioxide plays a role in the dilation of blood vessels. So if we breathe too hard, we get rid of too much carbon dioxide. And as a result, our blood vessels constrict. And this includes blood flow to the brain. So the main blood flow to the brain is the carotid arteries, constricts as a result of overbreathing. But that's only one part of the picture. The second part is that when we breathe too much, we get rid of too much carbon dioxide. There's an increase in blood pH, that the bond between the red blood cells and oxygen strengthens. And this is known as the Bohr effect, which you are aware of. So it's really interesting that the more air we breathe, it causes our blood vessels to constrict. And it also causes red blood cells, which are the main carrier of oxygen in the blood, to hold on to oxygen more readily. Now, how would people know this in their everyday life? I suppose it's very common for people who overbreathe to have cold hands and cold feet, to experience brain fog, to have a cloudy or a foggy mind, that they can't just quite concentrate. And the other thing is, you know, say the impact of sleeping. And I often say, like, many people snore and some people have obstructive sleep apnea. And if you think about snoring, we can snore through the mouth, we can snore through the nose. So I would like you to make the sound of a snore through your mouth. And it'll go something like, yeah. And then we do it through our nose and it goes something like, and then if I said for us to really slow down our breathing, keep our lips together, but to breathe really slowly. When we breathe really slowly, can we snore through the nose? That if we have a very slow breath in and a really relaxed, slow breath out, the snoring is more difficult. So in other words,
impossible.
Snoring,
impossible.
It is difficult to do. And snoring is not just because the airway is small. And that's another mistake that people look at. They say the person is snoring, the person has sleep apnea, their airway anatomy is too narrow, it's compromised. But of course, the airway is not just the only thing involved with snoring. We have to look at the flow of breathing. So if we're going around with our mouth open during the day, breathing faster and breathing harder, so that's impacting our sleep quality. And mouth breathing during sleep, we wake up with a dry mouth in the morning, we are tired, we've got very light sleep, we have sleep disruptions, then we cannot focus. How could we be able to have a calmness of the mind and a degree of concentration? And for some people, they have concentration naturally. But for many people like me, and probably like you, we had to develop our concentration.
Yeah,
And
it's almost everyone.
everyone,
And
yes.
it's very interesting what you're saying, because that's like the fundaments of what the oxygen advantage is. So can you talk us about the background about the method, how you created and why the oxygen advantage exists today, and how you created? Yeah.
Sure. I came across breathing myself for my own health back in 1998. It made a tremendous difference to my life. My background was I went to a university in Dublin called Trinity College in Dublin. And my degree, my MA, is in economics and social sciences. So I was never going to work in breathing. I came across it by accident. And it was 2 years later, maybe 3 years later, that I decided that I would, I discovered this first in 1998 by reading the work of a Russian doctor called Dr. Konstantin Buteyko. I applied his technique in terms of switching to nasal breathing, etc. 3 years later, then, I wanted to teach this method. So I reached out to the instructors in Russia, and I visited Russia, and I trained in Russia. And I changed my career from the corporate world to the breathing world. Now, when I started in 2002, very few people knew anything about breathing. And I'm not involved with yoga. So I was looking at breathing from a different perspective to yoga in terms of the biochemistry of breathing. How can you breathe to open up the airways, to open up the nose, the lungs, the blood vessels, and to increase oxygen delivery? That's what I was focused on. And this is not covered in yoga. So I was more in the health aspect of it. And I was lucky enough, I started working with people with asthma. We were getting really good results. And we even offered a money back guarantee that if you came to me with asthma, if I didn't get you results that you were happy with, you were entitled to get your money back. And we kept that money back guarantee going for, I would say, about 7 years. And yes, we gave a few refunds back, but I would say it wasn't more than 10 people. And I had worked probably with about 3,000 individuals with asthma then. And this was children and adults, from mild asthma to severe asthma. In some cases, we were working with severe asthma. The people didn't have enough breath to walk into the clinic. And then I started, 2007, I was working with asthma. I started working with sleep and snoring and obstructive sleep apnea. And it was a little bit again by accident, because I noticed that the people with asthma, when we helped their asthma, now they were telling me that they were sleeping better and they were waking up feeling more alert. So I said, well, there must be something here in this, because it's anecdotal if a few people say it to you. But if you have hundreds of people saying it to you, it has to be more than anecdotal. Of course, it's not a study, but when you can reproduce it, there's a cause and there's an effect. So then we looked at the whole sleep apnea and insomnia and snoring. And then a couple of years later, I started wondering, well, what about this for people with anxiety? If we can improve blood flow to the brain, if we can activate the diaphragm breathing muscle, if we can improve these people's sleep, because people with anxiety and depression and panic disorder, very often their breathing is at fault, but also their sleep is not good. How can you have a calmness of the mind unless you have good sleep quality? So my work was always focused on health. And then in 2012, 2013, well, it goes a little bit further. 2010, I was given courses on mindfulness and Buteyko. I love mindfulness. It's wonderful. I've done several Vipassana courses, 10 days of noble silence, but I couldn't just help thinking. If a person has dysfunctional breathing and poor breathing, it is very difficult for them to do mindfulness. And mindfulness is not going to fix dysfunctional breathing patterns. And if a person has poor sleep, it's going to be very difficult to concentrate because they don't have the energy. They are living in their head because their brain is almost like a cloud, that it's fuzzled thinking. So I was giving courses on breathing and mindfulness. You come to me, I show you how to breathe to have a calming effect on the mind, but I show you how to improve the physiology of your breathing, because mindfulness doesn't change the physiology of your breathing, and nor does cognitive behavioral therapy. So you think of all of the people who are going to psychotherapy, they go to their psychologist, they go to their psychiatrist, they learn cognitive behavioral therapy, which is wonderful, but it doesn't change respiratory physiology. We also need to change how we breathe. So a long story short, 95% of the people who attended for breathing and mindfulness were female. Men were not attending. This is in 2010. This is just right after the economic crash in Ireland. Many people were out of work. Many people were committing suicide. There was a big amount of anxiety and depression and stress around the country. And yet the men would not turn up. Where are the men? The men don't want to do breathing. So this is when I thought, well, this is oxygen advantage, because oxygen advantage originated as a male-dominated breathing technique. We can push the man. The man wants to feel power, push. So we give different breathing techniques to stress him, but also to improve his focus, his concentration, and his ability to handle stress. Because the measure of a leader is not how well you perform when everything is going well. Anybody can perform well when things are going smoothly. The measure of a leader is how well do you perform when things are not going well. When the situation is so difficult, do you have the capability as a leader to trade your way out of this? Do you have the ability to make perfect and good decision-making capabilities? But if you're very stressed, you're not going to be capable. And if you're stressed, you're not sleeping well that night, your body is in a state of stress, and the human body, it cannot deal with stress long-term. We can get away with stress for a little period of time, a brief period of time, but not for long-term. So oxygen advantage was all about performance, corporate performance, sports performance. So now, has it changed again? Yes, because now we are going to be moving into both performance and health. And this is the basis of a new book. It hasn't been published yet. I've just finished writing it about 1 month ago. It's 140,000 words. And it's looking at breathing across a number of different modalities. For example, the relationship between functional breathing and functional movement. You know, we have to talk about the diaphragm breathing muscle. It's not just for respiration, but it also plays a very important role. That's a big dog. It also plays a very important role in stabilization of the spine. So the generation of intra-abdominal pressure. And we know that people with functional movement, in functional movement screens, 87.5% of people in one study who passed functional movement screen were diaphragmatic breathers. Now, what's the importance of functional movement? Well, if you have dysfunctional breathing, you have dysfunctional movement. And if you have dysfunctional movement, you're at a greater risk of injury. So you think of strength and conditioning coaches, physiotherapy, physical therapy, Pilates, yoga. And I think the key is, it's not just about how we are breathing when we are in the studio, but it's about how does the person breathe when they walk down the street? How do they breathe when they drive their car? How do they breathe when they get into stress? And how do they breathe when they do physical exercise? And how do they breathe when they sleep? So
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And, you know, then we look at the topics, Lucas. Female breathing is fundamentally different than men. Mm-hmm. And this has been known since 1905, but yet I'm not aware, maybe there is, but I'm not aware of a technique that's specifically for females. Now, the oxygen advantage isn't specifically for females, but now we are starting to recognize that we need to adapt to male and female breathing. Look at the application of the breathing exercises for improving heart rate variability, for helping with people with type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, for people with epilepsy. So the application in terms of breathing, I wanted to have two pillars. One pillar of breathing is looking at your everyday breathing patterns, the potential application for helping especially bodily systems disturbed by stress. How can you help an individual recover? A person with burnout syndrome, a person with exhaustion syndrome, or a person who is already performing well, how can we get them that increment? So that's in terms of functional breathing is everyday breathing. And then we have the stress breathing exercises. This is doing breath holding to lower blood oxygen saturation, to increase carbon dioxide, to disturb the blood acid base balance, to force the body to make adaptations, which is conducive to improving sports and exercise performance. So I think this breathing technique is quite different in many ways, in that it's looking at everyday breathing patterns. It's looking at how can you improve your breathing during rest, physical exercise, sleep, and all of the functions that we as human beings engage in. And it's involving not just functional breathing patterns, looking at it from 3 dimensions. We look at functional breathing from a biochemical point of view, biomechanical point of view, and a resonant frequency or cadence point of view. But we also have the other side of it, stress the individual a little to force the body to make adaptations, hormesis. And it's bringing the two together. And, you know, I think it's a nice technique, and the results of it over the last few years have been wonderful.
Yes, we can see it with the people we work.
Yes.
It's amazing. It's just amazing. You see the transformation. You do it, and a beautiful thing about your method is that it's so simple, so easy to do, and you can do it any time in the day. For example, it's yes, you can make big changes in your life, big transformation in your life, because you know breathing impacts all your life. Breathing is the basis of our health, you know, but health, not thinking as a not to be sick, is about the performance in life for a human being. In the physical is the physical performance, emotional performance, mental performance, and those all aspects of life is, we are talking about spiritual too. It's all the dimensions of the human life. So interesting.
Yeah, and about that, I mean, athletes go and make very strong trainings for have adaptations in their body, and they are mainly working with the cardiovascular system. But I mean, cardiovascular system and breathing go together. They work together, but it's more easy to influence your breathing and have immediate reaction in your cardiovascular system.
Yes.
We almost can talk about these two systems as one system, because both have a main goal is to bring oxygen to the tissues. They work together. And that's why when we work with breathing and with our students or patients and clients, we have seen a huge enhancements in their cardiovascular performance, and high blood pressure goes down immediately.
Yeah,
in
it's
just
amazing.
weeks. It's insane, and they have to stop, and they stop taking medication. And this is a huge field in terms of health. But if we understand the blood flow and how this cardiovascular thing works, in terms of performance, not for people that have health issues, but a normal person that want to enhance something in their lives. This is huge because, as the methods say, the oxygen advantage. I mean, the main food of the body is the oxygen. But everyone is talking about food for change pH, for care the body about the impact of free radicals. But the food doesn't do the main work on this. It's the breathing, right? So you can fast, you can change your diet, you can change the food you can eat organic and all these things. But if you don't change the basis of that, it's not making that much. And there is a lot of research around this. It's not our words or your words. It's a lot of research around these kind of subjects that are huge in all human dimensions. So what is your perspective about why people is not talking about this more loud? I mean, now we have a huge wave of this. Reading is becoming more sexy. Reading is becoming more known because the Wim Hof and all other techniques that us around. But why you think the world is not talking more louder about these things?
I think it's because people didn't realize the full potential. And the reason that they haven't realized the full potential is because any breathing instructor, they typically teach within the domains of what they learned. And there are so many traditions in terms of breathing. For example, the physiotherapist, the yoga instructor, they typically will focus on the biomechanical aspect about breathing. The Buteyko instructor will typically focus on the biochemistry of breathing. Heart math instructor will typically focus on improving heart rate variability. But you cannot just focus on heart rate variability and not take into consideration the biomechanics and the biochemistry. And nor can you focus on the biochemistry and not take into consideration the biomechanics and heart rate variability. And the same for the yoga instructor, that in the practice of taking the big and deep breaths, they can be sacrificing the biochemistry and not taking into consideration the heart rate variability. So the one thing about the oxygen advantage was that it gave me a freedom. And it gave me a freedom to explore breathing from many different dimensions and to join the dots. And that's all it was. It's very, very simple stuff because all of the information is out there. And it was just a matter of bringing it together. And I think this is part of the reason that traditions, that we stay within our limited field. And because of that, the human being has not realized the full impact of breathing. You know, and that's in some ways, it's kind of, there's obviously other reasons as well. You could ask, well, why hasn't the person down the street realized about this? Well, doctors don't talk about it. You know, doctors traditionally don't talk about the importance of nose breathing. Like you spoke about high blood pressure there. If you have an individual going to their doctor, they tell the doctor they have high blood pressure, the doctor is going to give them a prescription. But yet we know for 30 years with the work of Paul Lehrer.
It's something important that because high blood pressure is they say is idiopathic or idiopathic illness. So it's something they don't know what causes it. And we know in our work that breathing is the main impact in blood pressure.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And again, Antonio, if you read a book going back to 1975 called The Relaxation Response by Herbert Benson, who was a medical doctor specialized in working with people with high blood pressure. And I remember one quote by him. He said, stress makes people sick. And on the basis that stress makes people sick, relaxation helps to make them better. And if we think about somebody coming into me with high blood pressure, two things that I have to suspect. Are they stopping breathing during sleep? Do they have obstructive sleep apnea? which is if it's chronic and continuous, will drive up blood pressure. And the second one is, are they stressed? Now, can we make a difference to obstructive sleep apnea? Yes, by restoring nasal breathing, correct tongue resting posture, breathing light, breathing slow, breathing low. Can we make a difference to stress? Yes, by looking at the biochemistry, the biomechanics, but also in terms of high blood pressure, we know that there are baroreceptors or pressure receptors in the major blood vessels, and these pressure receptors are monitoring our blood pressure. And these pressure receptors, when blood pressure increases, the pressure receptors send immediate signals for the blood vessels to dilate and the heart rate to normalize, or the heart rate to reduce to normalize blood pressure. And if conversely, if the blood pressure goes too low, these pressure receptors send immediate messages for the blood vessels to constrict and the heart rate to increase to bring up blood pressure towards normal. We can influence the baroreceptors by changing breathing patterns. And we can improve the baroreflex by nasal breathing during sleep, reduced volume breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, and also cadence breathing. So, like, I had just an interview with Dr. Eric Pepper from San Francisco State University just an hour ago. And he is also intrigued about breathing for many years. And the same question came up. And the reason that breathing has not got the attention is because it takes time. But as I said to Dr. Pepper, I said, yes, it takes time, but isn't it well worth it? Like, I was that kid and teenager going around with my mouth open. And if somebody said to me, Patrick, do you know if you breathe through your nose, you'll be less likely to have crooked teeth. You will have a better facial formation, which we know is correct. You won't be waking up with a dry mouth. You won't have increased dental cavities. You won't have bad breath. You won't be upper chest breathing fast and shallow. You won't be stuck in that fight or flight response. But the problem was, nobody said it to me. And that's what we are doing. So the books, through yourselves, you're reaching out to individuals. And what could be the best gift that we could give people? But give them the tools to empower themselves. And yes, we have to recognize there are some wonderful doctors, but the system is not wonderful, because the system is fundamentally big pharma. It's driven by, and 75% of research in our healthcare system is paid by pharmaceutical companies. Like, there is too much of a vested interest here. And why would big pharma want the person with blood pressure, high blood pressure? Why would big pharma want that person to learn reduced breathing and slow breathing? They don't. Big pharma wants to give a pill, a quick fix, and that's why I think society has not looked. But you know what? There's one thing here, because we have to look at it this way. I'm not sure how it is in Colombia, but traditional structures are changing. We look at the church here in Ireland. Young people are very educated now. They have the freedom to make up their own choices. And we can have spirituality that is not necessarily religion. The two don't always go hand in hand. And if you look at any traditional structure, people now are questioning that. Whereas 30 years ago, we gave so much power to the symbols of authority, to the medical doctor, to the school teacher, to the priest. And now, with a more educated society, we've got a more egalitarian society. And we too have the ability now to question, what are the motives? Most people have good motives, but what is the system behind it? Because I think the system is flawed.
Definitely. And right. I mean, in Colombia and in Latin American countries, normally we are like 5 years behind you in some terms. Here, people is very free. I mean, religion is free. You can have your thoughts. People is more educated.
Yes.
More and more, right? Yes. But I think this is an opportunity, because there is not here there's any knowledge about breathing. I mean, maybe we have because he is making a lot of noise, but it's a new field. It's a new market, if we want to talk in a term of business. That is not just like that. It's working with people and help, but of course can be a business too, helping people. And will be, I mean, it's a tough work because it's cleaning the path, it's creating the path, is change minds, is educating, and we are doing that really hard. That's why we are here with you today, because people must know this for improve not just health of individuals, but our society. Or the things that are happening in our society today is because it's a stress society. It's a society that works with anxiety. It's a society that works without knowing how his own body works. So as a collective, we have this kind of neurosis, right? So if we teach this breathing thing, we teach people how to breathe, we really can make a change in the way our society works, and we are improving the world. And that's why we are so passionate about this and being here today with you and just wearing the t-shirt, right? How we say in Colombia, we put the t-shirt for this because it's not about us, it's about the whole world know how to breathe. And if the whole world breathe together, the world will become better, right? And of course, I mean, I don't want us to stuck in just the health issues, because if we talk about the physical performance, we were showing reading about sports and how our body is made for movement. Our body is made for sports. We born as an athletes, but we lose it for our way of living. So we are oxygen advantage and breathing wakes up this athlete sleep in us, because a lot of people start working out and making exercise and they just give up because they cannot handle it. It's uncomfortable. And they go to the gym and the trainer push them so hard, then they go to an aerobic state, and that just make you sick, right? So how can breathing and the oxygen advantage give people the opportunity to engage again with their own body and start working out again and make exercise again and have a healthy life?
Well, we have to bear in mind that how hard you breathe during physical exercise is determined by how well you breathe or how not so well you breathe during rest, your everyday breathing. So if, for example, you have an individual and they are sleeping with their mouth open, or they spend during the day fast and shallow breathing, that their breathing is not up to par. And by the way, Lucas, look at the statistics of people with dysfunctional breathing patterns. 75% of people with anxiety. If we look at Kiesel's paper, he looked at 51 young subjects, and he's a professor of physical therapy from Evansville University in the United States. Only 10% of them passed all three dimensions of breathing. So the vast majority of people failed. They had, in other words, they had primarily dysfunctional breathing patterns. So dysfunctional breathing is very common. And I think partly is what you said is because of modern living, because of stress, because of talking all the time, because we're sitting down, because of our jobs, because of everything else. And people don't realize the impact that that's having on their productivity and how they feel and their overall happiness. So in terms of physical exercise, you can imagine somebody going to the gym, they're told to really push themselves, their breathing is getting elevated, they're gassing out, they have disproportionate breathlessness, they've got fatigue, they don't want to go back. It's too much. But if they change their everyday breathing patterns, if, for example, they spend some time during the day, they focus on their breathing, and they gently work to breathe less air, just for short periods of time. And by doing that, they allow carbon dioxide to increase in their blood. They will experience the difference because they will feel the temperature increase in their hands. they are likely to feel the saliva in the mouth increase. They are likely to feel themselves going into relaxation. But by exposing the body to increased carbon dioxide, that in turn is reducing the sensitivity of the body to carbon dioxide, and that in turn then reduces breathlessness during physical exercise. Now, somebody could say, well, I don't have dysfunctional breathing. My breathing is good. Okay, try the Bolt score. And all you need to do to measure your Bolt score is you sit down, you take a normal breath in and out through your nose, you pinch your nose with your fingers, and you time it in seconds until you feel the first definite desire to breathe. And then you let go, and your breathing should be fairly normal. That's your Bolt score. Kiesel's paper showed that if your Bolt score is above 25 seconds, there is an 89% chance that dysfunctional breathing is not present. Mm-hmm. So we really need to get the Bolt score to a minimum of 25 seconds. Now, for those individuals with dysfunctional breathing who are gassing out too much in the gym, their Bolt score will be 10 seconds, will be 15 seconds, will be 18 seconds. So it's a very good way to gauge how well will a person perform during physical exercise. And that's just one screening. And then we could say, well, if I go to a gym, I would say 95% of people are in there with their mouths wide open. Why are they breathing through an open mouth during physical exercise? It reduces oxygen uptake in the blood. It's shallow breathing. It affects flow state of the mind. It's also in terms of, trauma to the upper airways. It's drying out the mouth. It's drying out the lungs. It's contributing to bronchoconstriction. It's also reducing the utilization of oxygen. It's inefficient. It's expending more energy. Mouth breathing is connected with the upper chest, so we're not engaging the diaphragm as well as we should do. We're not getting the role, the full potential of the diaphragm in terms of the generation of intra-abdominal pressure. Now, so for me, it doesn't make sense. Like if we look at the mouth, if we look at in terms of respiration, when we take air in through the mouth, that air goes straight down our throat. What function does the mouth do in terms of breathing? None. And if we look at the nasal cavity performs 30 functions in terms of breathing. Now, the individuals, who is doing this? Well, we have every walk of life who is doing the oxygen advantage. For example, our instructor manual, we have Bellator, MMA fighters, but we also have a military. We've got some special weapons and tactics from the United States. We've also had special forces, elite special forces, paratroopers, Delta forces, and Navy SEALs attending the instructor training. So we have from corporate individuals to elite individuals, because in sports, people are looking for that margin of a benefit. And in terms of the breath holding, the stressor exercises that we do, there's a good body of research coming out from Europe in the last 10 years, mainly coming out of France and some of the studies coming out of Sweden. And to give you an example, in one paper looking at 21 elite professional rugby union players, they got them to do breath holding during repeated sprintability, and repeated sprintability in team sports is a performance indicator. It's the athlete's ability to do all-out effort to sprint, followed by a very brief recovery before all-out effort again. And before the trial, they could do 9 sprints before exhaustion. They then trained for 4 weeks with their normal training, and during the 4 weeks, they did between 2 and 3 sets of breath holding on the exhalation. What we do. After 4 weeks, their repeated sprintability was measured, and it had increased from 9 to 14.8. Now, there's an improvement, which is a phenomenal improvement, and we have to bear in mind that they are professional athletes during peak season. Normally, if you could get an improvement of 1%, it would be huge. But to get from 9 to 14.8, it's really, considerable.
Mm-hmm. And I think the important thing about this is not just to achieve this kind of goals with athletes. I mean, athletes can make insane things because they push themselves
Yes.
but they are harming their body,
Yes.
right? If you make a strong exercise, strong training, and strong performance events, and if you know how to breathe, of course your body do it. Our body's insane, is very intelligent, and he adapts.
Yes.
But I mean, I think the athletes are focusing in the wrong goal. I think the goal must not be to win the competition, to lift more weights, or to have a better, good-looking body. I
Yes.
mean, that's a consequence of a good health, because you can see athletes that make all this running really, really hard, and at the end of the competition, they're gassing out and they're really, really bad at the end, passing out, right? Hyperventilating. They do it. The
Yes.
body can do
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
But why you have to do that to your body? You are harming yourself. You don't have to do that. You can. I mean, we have to start to see physical performance in other dimensions, like a consequence of an overall health, right? And the other thing about that, the other dimension of this is the mind, the resilience, the ability to be resilient. People, another aspect why people doesn't go to gym and doesn't make workout and train themselves is because they are not used to change. That's why a lot of people with this COVID thing, they lose a lot of the way of living change, and they just get in anxiety, get stressed. I was with my dentist a few weeks ago, and she told me a lot of people lose their teeth. They broke their teeth for
Clenching.
pressing
Yes.
their jaws.
Yeah.
So this thing is another aspect to see. It's not just a physical thing, it's the overall health that you can impact, changing your
Yes.
breathing and recovering your breathing. Remember it, because
Yes.
actually we're born with a perfect breathing. We lose it, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
I don't know
Well,
if Antonio want to add
our
something.
breathing can be influenced by the breathing of our mother, and heart rate variability, which is a measure of resilience. If you look at elite athletes track their HRV, and HRV is just a measurement, but the means of impacting it and improving it is through the breath, at least one of the means. But if an athlete has a reduced heart rate variability, on that day they won't train because they realize that their body is in a state of stress. And if they train on that day, they increase the risk of injury. But this thinking hasn't trickled down. And I remember the story of one really famous Kenyan athlete, and he was track and field. And the Kenyans were, I think they were training in America, and this is going back about 10 or 15 years ago. And the Kenyan would train on one day, and then the next day when his colleagues came to see where he was, he said, no, today I don't train. And they said, he doesn't want to train today, but he listened to his body, and his body was telling him, today I don't train, today I rest, today I recover, but tomorrow I train. And he was a top class performing athlete. So if you, now when we consider with technology that we can measure stress in the human being, and coming back to it with the baby, a mother who is anxious and a mother who is in a high state of stress, she passes on the HRV to the child. So the young infant baby is born with reduced heart rate variability. And this is not to make any mother feel guilty, but it's just to show that the impact of our breathing and state of stress, how it can impact us more than ourselves. And the other thing is, like, if you look at people, the research now for the last 30 years, people who are unwell, either physically or emotionally, they have reduced heart rate variability, and we can improve that with pretty much all of the exercises that we are doing. That is a marker of resilience. And just as you said, the dentist with the patients with bruxing, they're clenching. If they're doing it during the day, it's anxiety. If they're clenching and grinding during sleep, it's a sleep problem. But we can still help both by changing breathing patterns.
Yes. It's
Yeah,
so interesting that there is something so interesting. When we are babies, for example, when we born, and if we born in a healthy way and complete, we have a perfect breathing, perfect posture in our body, a complete flexibility, and the silence in our mind, because we can stay in silence when we are in womb for 9 months, we are in a silence state, and then we can stay in silence 2 years later before we talk. We learn to talk, and then we quiet, but we continue talking here. And we born also with something very interesting, that is trust. We are trusting life, because we as mama, we are completely dependent of other when we born. Difference with other animals. We born with all this, but 5 years later, 7 years later, we have lost all these treasures that we born with. So I think we don't have to learn to breathe. We have to remember. It's something that we lost, and that's our work, to help people to remember our natural condition, at our original condition. And I think it's my personal approach to this, that mystics all around the world, the spiritual traditions all around the world are saying the same. We have to come back to our natural state. And our natural state is a parasympathetic state with, it's a balance. It's a balance between our nervous system. But this civilization, this society, this culture is founded in the sympathetic system, in the fight or flight mode. We are always fighting. We are always making everything with a lot of effort. Even breathing. When breathing, you don't need any effort to breathe. You know, our body is designed just to exhale, not to inhale. With that, we don't have to do nothing to inhale, just to relax. But we think, and we have in our mind, that we have to inhale, and that is the most important part. We are lost. We have to remember how we are designed, beautifully designed. We have to connect again with life. Life is without effort. It's my approach. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, it's
and
really nice.
With your work, with this kind of work, you are helping us to remember. I am every day I work with this in myself, with people. Say, wow, this is the key, the door to that.
Yeah, it's great.
There is something important about all this that my father is saying, and you say it. I mean, it's a huge responsibility as a human beings. You talk about the parents and how the mother teach. I mean, we think teaching and learning is just about what you say. But the chemistry in the human body is so complex that we absorb the other people around chemistry. That's why when women are friends for too much long time, their cycles regulates and they have their days in the same days. That's insane. And as a mother, you teach your child how to breathe in silence. So why anyone is saying to mothers, new mothers, learn how to breathe, and you will have a more regulated child, right? In the emotions, in the physical way, in the chemistry, everything, you are impacting that. And you, being a better breather, you are impacting the people around.
Yes.
So it's a lot of connection. Breathing teaches to have responsibility, not just with us, but with others.
Yes.
And that's a huge thing to think about. So, yeah.
Yes, it's limbic regulation. If you are regulated yourself, you regulate all around you. That's all.
And it ties in very nicely as well with the mind, because when we have our attention on the breath, we are helping to create some space between thoughts. But also when we reduce the volume of air we breathe, and when we address the biochemistry of breathing or improve it, it is a calming effect on the central nervous system, which in turn is going to reduce thought activity. Also, when we breathe slow, we help to activate the body's relaxation response, which is a calming effect on the mind. And when we breathe low, and the connection between the diaphragm and the mind, it is a calming effect on the mind. So in so many ways, as you said, that it's the impact of our breathing is affecting more than just us. But also when we focus on the breath and we create space between thoughts and we bring our attention into present moment awareness, we are helping to reduce the pollution of the mind, and we are not polluting the space around us. So because our own mind is calmer, we are calmer, and when we are calmer, it has a calming effect on the people that we interact with. So we, in terms of, and that's a totally different aspect to it, but it ties very nicely in with what we are doing. That it's the interconnection of the body and the mind, and the breath is the bridge.
Yeah, and this is very useful. I mean, in a corporative world, today we are having a lot of people with burnout. I know you are like writing and working on that now. How this, that is our biology, it's not mystic, it's not something religious, it's something that happens. And science knows that now. How we can use this knowledge to impact our work, to impact the business world and the corporative world, because CEOs and people that have a lot of responsibility, they are not achieving their whole potential because maybe they don't know how really they use their own mind and their own body. So how you think this thing go together with this subject of business work and performance?
If we look at focus and concentration, concentration is our ability to hold our attention on a subject matter for a period of time without distraction. In order to concentrate, you need to be able to use and focus your attention. But if we have poor sleep, and if we have an agitated mind, our mind is distracted, we are living in our head, we are not able to concentrate, but also we are more prone to stress. So I don't think anybody can be creative, intuitive, or productive to the full extent of their ability unless they have the potential to put 100% of their attention, undivided attention, on doing what they are doing. If we want to produce a quality of work, we need to be able to place our attention on that work. I remember in school, I would be reading a book and I would have the page open and I would be looking at the page. But when I got to the bottom of the page, I wouldn't remember any of the material because I was only looking at the page, but my attention was not on the page. My attention was stuck in my head. And for me to learn that information, I had to put so much time in reading it over and over and over. Some people have the capacity to concentrate naturally. Those people make tremendous businesses. I have seen one. I've seen one person. I was at university and I'd spent 3 months studying for an exam. And I always tell this story because it stuck out so much. I spent 3 months studying and preparing for an exam. And my friend, Terry Clune, at the time, he didn't do any studying because he was setting up a business. And 20 minutes before the exam, he decides to study. And I'm there doing my 20 minutes to refresh information. And he comes in, and for 20 minutes, he has his full attention on the notes. And I knew he wasn't just looking at the notes, but he was absorbing the information. His attention was on the text. We went off, we did our exam, we got the same result. It took him 20 minutes. It took me 3 months. Now, the same person, this was back in 1995, 1996. He was setting up a business called taxback.com. And he had been setting it up since 1994. He has about 1,200 employees. He is worth about 700, 800 million US dollars. So he has set up a very, very profitable and tremendous business and great place for people to work. And it's creative. And, you know, it's not a multinational in terms of, but it's a multinational that would have a caring ethos. And I know that because I've spoken with many of the people who have worked for him. But it's coming back to it. How could he set up such a wonderful business? Well, he had the power of concentration. He was able to create gaps between thinking because original and fresh ideas don't happen when the mind is racing. We need to create space between thoughts for original and creative solution to come into being. However, if we have an agitated mind, as I did, if we have poor sleep, there is not likely to be gaps between thoughts, and we are consumed by thought, and our resilience is reduced, our stress levels are higher, and our happiness is reduced. So it's not just about focus and concentration. It is known that people whose minds wander a lot, and especially those with racing minds, they are not happy, but it all comes together.
There is something that you say that is beautiful. In university and school, they teach us how to think,
Yes.
but they never teach us how to stop thinking.
Yes.
And that's so important as learn how to think.
Yes, it's absolutely vital. It is one of the most beneficial things that I learned was, how can I bring calmness to my mind? How can I control my mind? Because you could say, you know, people say, well, they have full control over their mind. And then I would say to them, well, if I asked you to stop thinking, how long could you stop thinking for? Without force, how long could you stop thinking for before thoughts come in? And I say, now I would like you to stop thinking. And they stop thinking. And 2-3 seconds later, bump, thoughts are coming into the mind. So most people, the vast majority, don't have control of the mind, but the mind has control of them. But we can take back control of the mind. and the breath is one aspect of helping to do that.
Yeah, so I think the uses of the applications of breathing are huge.
Yes.
I mean, because we are not talking about applications in some aspects. We are talking in application in the human being itself, and the human being itself is the big tool, right?
Yes.
To do anything you want. And now I really want to ask you something, because I mean, there is another techniques and breathing methods around the world now. Here in Colombia, Latin America, maybe the reverting, these ways of breathe work, Wim Hof method has been really huge around. A lot of people is doing it. And can you talk us about how the oxygen advantage can work together with this kind of methods? I mean, our method is different because Wim Hof is a hypoxic, hypocapnic response, what it does. And us is hypoxic, hypercapnic.
Yes.
And these have a really different approach and changes in the body. But I know there is a lot of Wim Hofers around, and I know Wim Hofers that have more of the Wim Hof method when they know the oxygen advantage, because they understand better. And when they mix it, they really can go through the real benefits of this. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, many of our instructors are also Wim Hof instructors. So we have many instructors, many oxygen advantage instructors also teach the Wim Hof method. The Wim Hof method is a stressor. It's designed to cause the body to make adaptations, including improved immunity. So it's quite a wonderful method. Now, we do breath holding, but the only difference between the breath holding with the Wim Hof method and the breath holding that we do is that we don't do hyperventilation prior to the breath hold. The oxygen advantage is a little bit different because we also want to look at somebody's everyday breathing patterns. I spend a lot of time looking at sleep disorder breathing, sleep apnea, snoring, anxiety, slowing down the breath, improving blood flow, opening up the airways, how to breathe to optimize alveolar ventilation, how to breathe more efficiently during physical exercise, how to stimulate the vagus nerve, how to increase heart rate variability, how to improve resilience, and we do the stressor exercises. So there are some similarities, and that I suppose one aspect was that a lot of my work is talking at dental conventions and at congresses where there are doctors, there are dentists, there are orthodontists, there are speech and language pathology, there are physiotherapists, there are physical therapists, and these professions need to know the science. So traditionally for 15 years, if I was to make a statement to a group of people who are trained in healthcare, I need to be able to support it. And what that done then was it forced me to be able to support as best that I can with the available evidence. So that's why we do our best to support every aspect of it with the physiology, with studies, with papers, with expert opinion. And you know, this makes it then more acceptable that I'm not just taking ideas out of the thin air, that we can back it up. And that's why a lot, you know, in terms of, we have many healthcare providers, many speech and language pathologists, many physiotherapists that have an interest with this and teach the technique. And they teach it because we can provide references and backup data as well with that.
Very cool. I think there is a lot of people, you know, that now we are like launching our advanced training for instructors.
Yes.
The first training just in Spanish, and that we are very excited about that. because I
Yes.
think a lot of people will benefit of this. People with anxiety, people with a lot of issues, chronic disease, and this will give a tool, a new tool that is a game changer, as I say, for treatment these things. I think what breathing is something that with the time will be included in everything. Must be, must be. Breathing has been so silent for so many years, but now is the time that breathing is making the noise it deserves.
Yes. The awareness of the breath has, this year, 2020, has been phenomenal.
Mhm.
And it didn't just happen this year. It's been happening over the last 3 to 4 years. But I would say that there's an awareness that this is really topical and people are starting to get it. And I don't think that this is going to be a honeymoon period, because when we look at the application of breathing from a number of different dimensions and the potential of this across so many fields, a psychologist who knows about breathing and sleep, a psychotherapist, a physiotherapist, all of the professions, breathing plays a role in speech. Breathing is playing a role in respiration. Breathing is playing a role in sports performance. Many professions are going to be, if you have somebody in the healthcare, the wellness industry, the sports and fitness industry, that they can bring in another modality to help their clients, and one that's simple, that's very straightforward. It doesn't cost a lot of money. There's no investment required. Okay, training fee, but it's a good investment in terms of you're learning the tools that you have for life, and you can work with those tools for as long as you work. Maybe 20 years, maybe 30 years you will be working. You will have those tools to help your clients and students over that period of time. So I think breathing is wonderful. It is, and it absolutely changed my life 22 years ago. I changed careers on the back of it. I felt it was the right thing to do, and it was the right thing to do intuitively. And sometimes we have to listen to that gut instinct, but we have to create space in the mind, and we can have to do that through the breath and to listen to what, is around us.
Yeah, and a lot of therapists now are looking for ways for not using medication.
Yes.
And I know they say patients breathe and meditate, but they really don't know the science behind breathing and how they use it properly to really help.
Yes.
I mean, medication sometimes is needed. Sometimes is needed,
Of course.
but a lot of times is not.
Yes.
If you really go to the base of the problem. And if we give these tools to therapists, they will have more to work with some patients. And and the beautiful about breathing, and it's like an invitation. We don't teach anything.
Mm-hmm.
We guide the people to find something in themselves.
Yes.
In the exploration of their own body. And maybe sometimes, and in a lot of times, the answer is there. It's just knowing how this beautiful machine works, what buttons to press, the right one, and it works. Sometimes it don't. And when it don't, okay, we have to use the medication, right? But if we can handle these things just with the people know his own body, and it's not just fixing the problem it have, the anxiety, the depression, the asthma, these things, but they are improving their overall health. That's much better. So we really have to go deep on this, and we are amazed that because you are really making a work that is needed in the world right now and spreading the breath through more people And we are very proud to be part of your team, to be part of the Oxygen Advantage team, and to spread the invincible breathing to the world.
Yes,
thank you so much
for Antonio and Lucas. I think it's tremendous, and I would say thanks very much for helping and getting the work out to Latin America, to Colombia and Latin America. I think you will find the work very, very rewarding, and we will have quite a long partnership in the years ahead. So I will close it by saying to everybody who's watching, look at the potential of breathing. And, really when you break it down, and I'm not saying that this is a cure-all or anything like that, but we can influence so many processes and functions of the human body through the breath. And they are those very important functions. And we're talking about sleep, we're talking about the mind, we're talking about physical performance. So I will leave it at that. And I would encourage people, delve a little bit further into it. We will have information in Spanish up on the websites, the social media platforms of Oxygen Advantage for Colombia, and in Spanish you will have available, so that people can do their own research and to get an insight into the method and see what the breath can do for you.